And now we turn to Zyro Roze and his conversation with Michelle Higgs, a candidate for state government who got started in political activism by getting involved to address a toxic waste plume in Martinsville, the legacy of a dry cleaning operation in the town not far from Bloomington.
We have with us today Michelle Higgs. She's a candidate for Indiana House District 60, and she's going to let us know what issues she's about, what kind of initiatives she's putting forward, and maybe some upcoming events. You used to be involved with Hoosier Action. That's how I initially met you, and some people may not realize what that is. You want to describe Hoosier Action and what your role was with them?
Sure. First, thank you for having me. Hoosier Action is a member-led organization doing grassroots organizing in small towns in rural Indiana. And I got involved with them when my family returned to Indiana in 2016. I grew up here, but after graduating high school, I went to Martinsville High School. And after I graduated from there, went away to school, met my husband. We lived in Los Angeles, and I returned with my family in 2016 to be near my parents. So I wanted to get involved in community and just meeting people and getting reoriented. And Hoosier Action had just formed, and so we became members. And then I stepped into doing operations with them and then moved up to being a statewide member engagement director. And we were building out the statewide chapter when they moved down to, we were oriented in Monroe County, and then they moved down to New Albany to really focus on some hyper-local politics there. And so I basically then spent the year kind of reorienting and found myself with this opportunity. So, yeah.
Yeah, and so some of the issues that Hoosier Action was involved with was healthcare, housing, environmental contamination. Yeah,
so all of those, the way I got reconnected into Martinsville was they were dealing with a toxic plume that was impacting people greatly, unbeknownst to them. There was a lot of cancer clusters and that kind of thing. And when one of our organizers was doing canvassing up there and surfacing issues, people were voicing concerns around the contaminated water that was not being addressed at the local or the state level. And so they were trying to get a Superfund site developed. And so there was organizing around that, one of the first big events that we worked on. And that was pretty powerful just to see people from around the state show up in solidarity. And that was where we were really learning the process of how do you communicate to legislators? How do bills get through the state house? All of those different things. It was very educational. The other issue that I was very involved with was pregnant worker accommodations. And so we went multiple times to the State House and advocated for pregnant women who, even as simple as just having an extra break, that was being denied. Many people had lost their pregnancies because their doctor requests were not being honored. And the legislation kept refusing. And finally, when push came to shove, they got to a point where the best they could offer was that a woman wouldn't get fired. And that was already at a federal level. So that was quite an eye-opener, especially in a state that advocates as a right to life state. The most basic things were not being advocated for. So then COVID hits, right? And housing becomes this issue. And I also am a small landlord. I actually got into rental properties mostly just to help some family. And so the people that I was renting with, it was one of those things where it's like nobody's made homeless through this. We're all in this together. And that was also where Hoosier Action came and we advocated strongly for rent relief. And just, again, to make sure that in these times of crisis, people matter, and the policies need to reflect that. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting to see that there was a large turnout in Martinsville. That's where me and my buddy Rich, we went to that event. You guys bust us there. He's since passed from metastatic renal cancer, and that's kind of possibly related to water quality and chemicals in the water and these PFAS, forever chemicals and things. So, it's not abstract to some of us out here about getting kidney cancer from the way things are managed. But he was very impressed with Hoosier Action. He'd been an activist over the years. He was 84, and he was glad to see a new thing kind of really coalescing and coming together. And he touted that to a lot of people that hey, Hoosier Action is really on it and have their thing together, and hoping that you guys can make some impact. But you've stepped back from Hoosier Action to run for the Indiana House District. What are the areas that District 60 deals with? I think it's Benton and...
Yeah, so for Monroe County, we have Benton, 1, and Washington townships. There are two precincts in Monroe County, those two. There's 13 precincts up in Johnson County, and then 33 precincts in Morgan County. So, and it's carved out, it does not include Mooresville. So, when we talk about redistricting and gerrymandering and the effects of that, it's a very real thing because, we, especially those of us that are in some of the rural parts of these counties, we're disconnected from the things that we normally would call community. So, for example, school districts. The school district that my sons are part of is the Monroe County School District, right? And yet the district that I'd be representing, that's the Martinsville School District. And it's one of those situations where my heart is there because that's where I graduated, and my brothers graduated from there. So, and I have friends that are from there, but my present life right now, is not as intertwined. And yet I represent most Hoosiers when it comes to how they are integrated into public life and their representatives, whether it be at a very local level all the way up to federal level. If we were to start to take where you live and then layer all of the maps of people who represent you, none of them line up. And sometimes I feel like that's intentional because the more we make it confusing of where's my representative and where do the lines cross over, the less engaged you're going to be and the less you're going to hold your elected representatives accountable because you actually don't know who is responsible for the conditions that are happening. And so that's something that I'm really just learning as I'm running for office and seeing people just trying to figure out where they belong. And I've had conversations with people where the examples that they give are, my child goes to a district that's over here, but I'm paying taxes to this township over here. And I work in this county completely unrelated. And the people who represent me are all the way down here and I never go to that community. And so I think that's an important conversation to have. And what does that impact us and how does that make us feel isolated? And I think that plays very much into this rugged individualism that we've been told that we have to have. And I don't believe it's because of any, moral failing or even moral calling. I think it's almost like we've had to be because we've been pulled so disconnected from community. And we talk about, it takes a village to raise a child. And we've slowly pulled away the village and then turned around and said, what's wrong? Why are our children struggling?